Welcome back to the Nose Plays Battlefleet Gothic Armada. I received a request from one of my viewers to maybe make a little bit more of this content for the channel, so I'm happy to do that. I think at this point I've given you guys enough of a taste of the campaign and what it entails. I don't really want to spoil too much of it for you guys if you do decide to pick the game up and play it. The campaign is fantastic. It's well worth your time to play through the campaign. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of replayability in the campaign. Once you've played through it once, it doesn't really change. And so, with that in mind, I think I'm going to halt the campaign videos. But I did want to show you some of the other parts of the game. I will say at this point, multiplayer is pretty much dead unless you're playing with people you know. It's very hard to get a match in multiplayer at this point in this game. But there are certain times of the day and the week where you might be able to get a match if you really want to. And again, it's a lot of fun when you're playing against friends, people that you know. So that's something to keep in mind. But there is kind of a AI skirmish mode that is a ton of fun. And this is the only game mode besides multiplayer where you have access to the other factions. And so I thought I would take some time to go ahead and outline each of the factions and give you some information on them, and then maybe play with each of them once or twice in a video series. So we're going to go ahead and pull up the Choose Your Faction screen. And the way that this works is you create an admiral from one of these 6 factions, and then over time, through completing skirmish missions, similar to the missions that you do in the campaign, you will collect renown points that you can use to upgrade your fleet, and eventually you'll be able to max out your fleet with all of the different skills, points, ships, weapons, everything that you want. And then you can play really massive battles, just random AI engagements. You don't know who your opponent's going to be, you don't know what the match type is going to be, so you have to build kind of a fleet that is capable of handling a lot of different things. And there is a little bit of persistence in between battles, so if your ships get damaged, sometimes they're out of commission for short periods of time, and you'll have to play a battle without some of your better ships if they take too much damage. As you can see on the screen, the advantages and disadvantages of each faction are kind of outlined for you. And so we were playing with the Imperial Navy, and that is mainly who you use during the campaign. They have very powerful Nova cannons, which are extremely long-range AoE weapons that can deal massive amounts of damage, especially to smaller, lighter ships. They have very strong prow armor, which means their frontal armor is higher than most other ships, and so if you face your enemy with your prow, you tend to have a lot more survivability than when you're broadside against them. And they have a lot of different types of torpedo ships. Torpedoes are extremely powerful weapons in the game. There's different types of torpedoes, and we didn't really go over that in the campaign, but different types of torpedoes are more effective against different types of enemies. So that's important. They're not very effective at long range, so other than their handful of very powerful weapons like the Nova Cannon and their torpedoes, their long range weaponry, their long range guns are pretty minimal. The Imperial Navy kind of has to get into medium or close range for their weapons to be most effective, which can be difficult against certain factions. The Imperial Navy also have particularly slow ships, so we don't have the fastest ships in the galaxy. You can kind of overcome some of those limitations with upgrades. Your gauge meter does allow you short boosts of maneuverability, but largely speaking, without your engines fully operational, you're just not going to be very fast. So the Chaos Fleet is somewhat of the antithesis, I guess you could say, of the Imperial Navy. They have very long-range ships. A lot of their weapons have extremely long range, and that means they can target you and hit you from very far away before your guns even get in range, and they can do a lot of damage. Their ships are also very fast, and ideal for kiting, so they can keep you at long range and prevent you from doing any significant damage to their ships while continuing to batter you, primarily with lance weaponry. They have very good lance weapons. Lance weapons are very powerful, but they also have some particular weaknesses, and so you can kind of outfit your ships to handle lance weaponry a little bit better, but Chaos ships are good with those. They also have many launch bays, which means a lot of their ships have fighters, bombers, and assault boats that they can launch at you, and those also have extremely long range and are very, very powerful. They have low damage with their macro cannons, so their basic cannons are weaker than most other factions, and they don't have very many torpedo armed ships, and also their armor is pretty mediocre, so they don't have the heavier armor that the Imperial Navy and some of the other ships have. Orc pirates are a lot of fun to play. Their ships are very customizable, so this is in the campaign tutorial. I mentioned that some ships are customizable. Instead of having lots of different patterns of ships like the Imperial Navy does, you just have one type of ship. Like they have the small orc ship, the big orc ship, and then the really big orc ship. But there's a lot of different ways that you can outfit those ships with different weapons, and so you get these points that you get to spend on your weapons, and we'll take a look at that when we play with the orc pirate fleet. But basically they have extremely resilient ships, lots and lots of hull points. Orcs put a lot of hull plating on their ships, and they also have very strong assault action, so their boarding actions with their boarding pods and their lightning assaults are very, very strong. They also have low morale, so they're more likely to disobey orders and leave the field if you're not careful. They have extremely poor maneuverability, so they're very easy to outmaneuver even by slow ships like the Imperial Navy. But they do have a very fair amount of speed in short bursts, and so they can keep up with other enemies. They just can't turn and maneuver quite as effectively. And they also have very poor accuracy and range, so their weapons are only going to be good at close range and in large numbers. Most other ships are going to outgun an orc ship, but they make up for that with their boarding actions and their high durability. They're also particularly good at ramming because of their high armor and hull points and size of ships, so they have very good ramming ability. The Eldar Corsairs are one of the more difficult fleets to play with, but also one of the more powerful. They have extremely fast and maneuverable ships. Their ships are by far the most maneuverable ships in the game. They have the best fighters and bombers, and they have extremely good morale, so they're very, very unlikely to leave the field of battle even when they're doing poorly. But their ships are very fragile. They don't have a lot of armor and they don't have a lot of hit points, so they're easy to take out. Most weapons are only mounted to the front of their ships, so they don't have good broadside maneuvers. A lot of their guns mainly point to the front, and they're very vulnerable to assault actions as they're frailer than many other races, and so in melee combat they can be overwhelmed. The Eldar have some unique shields for their ships which help improve their durability, but it's very micro intensive. Basically the way their shields work is as long as their ships are moving, they have some kind of a damage reduction shield. It's different than normal shields. I think it's basically like a flat save, so like based on how much it's charged up will determine what the chance of stopping an enemy shot is, rather than just absorbing damage. But if you can limit their maneuverability through various methods in the game, you can stop their shields from generating, and that can allow you to basically destroy their fragile ships very quickly. So they have to play very smart. Those shields are also super effective against lances, and that is one of the reasons why you don't want to take lance weapons against Eldar Corsair ships. Their shields are one of the main counters to lance weaponry, so keep that in mind if you decide to play with the Eldar or against them. Space Marines were the first DLC that came out shortly after the game was released. It did come for free to anybody who pre-ordered the game, and I believe it was a very reasonable amount of money for purchase after that. The Space Marines have some cool things. First of all, they have color schemes that you can set up before you start. Similar to the color schemes we looked at with the Imperial Navy, but they are based on the main Space Marine chapters. And so when you start your Space Marine faction, you have to choose a single chapter that you are going to be. So I believe there's Ultramarines, Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Dark Angels, and Imperial Fists are the 5 chapters that you can choose from. Unfortunately, they don't have custom chapters available in this game. However, I did read that they plan on having significantly more chapters to choose from and possibly more customization options in terms of how you color your fleet. Space Marines obviously are very resilient to insubordination. They have very strong assault actions, as Marines are some of the most powerful fighters in the universe, and they have highly powerful favors. We didn't talk much about favors. We'll look at those a little bit later perhaps, but these are basically unique skills that you can have. You can only have one. Every faction has 4, and each ship can only have access to 1 favor. You can have multiple ships with the same favor, but they're very expensive and very powerful effects on the game. Their ships are extremely expensive. They're not very efficient at long range, so they have short range weaponry similar to the Imperial Navy, and they don't have defensive fighters. All of the other factions have some type of defensive fighter that you can deploy, which will help take down bombers. They'll help take down torpedoes and other things. And so they're an important defensive tool that you can use in certain engagements. Space Marines have no access to these, but they do have some pretty strong assault fighters that they can use to deploy different types of assault actions on other ships. So they're really good with that. Their ships are also very, very maneuverable. Not quite as fast and maneuverable as the Eldar, but very, very close. They have some of the most maneuverable ships in the game, and they're also highly armored, particularly in the front. The Tau Empire were the final piece of DLC that was added to the game. I think it came out, I think maybe like a month or 2 after the game released and after the Space Marines were offered. I could be wrong on that, but this was the last piece of major DLC that was offered for the game before the developers decided that they really liked what they had started, but they needed to kind of redo some things to make the game that they really wanted to make. And so they immediately began development on the second game after about a year, I think, into this one, rather than continuing to just add DLC to this game. So it was an interesting decision. A lot of people were really disappointed with that, but it sounds like if this new game and the new engine works better for them, then perhaps it was the right choice, and time will tell with that. The Tau have a lot of auxiliary ships. They're very efficient at long range. In fact, they have some of the most powerful long range weaponry in the game, and they have adaptive strategies with Tau warfare. We'll have to look into that, but basically you get to kind of choose from a couple of different options as to some benefits and how you're going to deploy. So it's pretty interesting. I haven't played a lot with the Tau. I don't know a ton about them in the lore. They kind of came after I fell out of playing the game of Warhammer, so I know a little bit about them, but not a ton. They are weak at close range. Their close range weapons are not as good. They have low hull points, similar to the Eldar, and they do not have the ability to use lightning strikes. However, they do have normal boarding actions and a variety of other important tools that they can use. So we're going to go ahead and look at the Orcs today. I'm going to take a few minutes because I've played with them probably the most out of anything other than maybe the Imperial Navy and the Space Marines. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at one of my captains, Mordaka Redeye. And I told you before when we were in the campaign, looking at Port Maw, that a large portion of the game takes place in this Port Maw-ish screen, and so this is where you're going to spend a lot of time in the skirmish mode. This is the main hub where you outfit, upgrade, and kit out your ships. And so the orcs have a variety of different ships. I have unlocked the battle cruiser. I believe there's one more class of ship above battle cruiser, but I can't remember exactly what it's called. But we have the same basic classifications as any of the other factions. So we start with light cruisers, then we have cruisers, battle cruisers, and then maybe battleships, I think is the last category. We also have a variety of escort ships that we can use in place of our regular ships, or if we just have extra points left over. And you can see the orc ships, they look very sturdy. Orcs have the basic same menus with all the same similar kinds of stat placement and everything. Weapons are found here, and then we have slightly different traits. So we'll look at some of the traits for the orcs real quick, and then we'll look at some of my ships, and then I'll show you kind of how the skirmish mode works. But we have orc accuracy, so you can take a look at this compared to imperial accuracy. You'll notice that it's significantly lower. You can upgrade this a little bit, but orcs are just not very good at shooting things accurately. We have orc savagery, which gives us an additional assault action during boarding. So boarding actions, as it pointed out in the last screen, are extremely effective with orcs, and this is one of the reasons why we get basically an extra roll to try to damage stuff with our orc boys. We have a disorganized, which gives us lower morale than most other factions, and so we have a double roll for insubordination, 40%, we have a 40% chance at 30% hull integrity of running away. That's higher than most. 16% when a line ship is lost, and 4% when an escort ship is lost. And this is a big disadvantage. One of the ways to beat an orc fleet is basically to just focus fire one ship at a time and hope that the rest of the boys run away as one ship falls, and then the next ship falls or runs away. So you can kind of create a chain reaction of retreat with orcs. Their movement abilities are basically the big red button. They get one movement ability, it's used up all at once, and then it takes a long time to recharge, but it does allow the orcs to move incredibly fast for a brief period of time. However, they can't turn quickly like the Imperial ships can, and so they really have to plan their use of this ability. Otherwise, it can very, very easily put them out of position. It's also very, very useful for ramming. So if you're trying to finish off an enemy ship by ramming them, you can hit the big red button and do a bunch of extra damage. They're noisy. Orcs are incredibly noisy, and so they do not have the ability to run silent. Running silent, if you may remember, is a tactic you can use to make your ship invisible on the map. So not only will you not show up to enemies, but you won't even have a radar blip that you can target. You'll just completely disappear from the map. Orcs not so good at subtlety, and so generally can't do that. Custom, this is one of the things I pointed out when designing ships. You get to customize your ships by choosing different points and what kinds of weapons you want on that ship. And then looted ship. On this ship, the duration of critical damage is 100% longer, and hull breach deals 100% extra damage. So basically, any kind of abilities that deal fire damage are incredibly effective against orcs. And this is one of their big weaknesses. This is the way you get around their superior hit points and armor, is by using fire damage weapons. And there are a number of weapons that can do that. Number of different ways that you can set fire on ships. Boarding is probably the easiest way. There are also certain types of torpedoes that will cause fires when they hit rather than normal damage. Armor wise, they have strong frontal armor and good side armor, but their rear armor is not as good. They have a weak spot in the back of most of their ships, and so that's another key that you have to be careful to protect. Because you lack maneuverability, it's often the case that enemy ships can get behind you and stay behind you for prolonged periods of time. And so you got to be real careful with your orc ships being attacked from the rear. But from the front, you have incredible resilience. We have very similar special orders: the reload, the lock on, and the brace for impact. You'll notice we're missing the running silent order, as was pointed out before. We also have the ability to repair our ships, warp jump, basic boarding attacks. These are the boarding pods from the sides only. And then the lightning strike is a teleportation of orcs into a ship, and this can be used at range in any direction, so it's pretty powerful. Okay, some of the upgrades are very similar to the Imperial upgrades. In fact, many of these are the same. However, there are a few unique ones. I'm not going to point all of them out, but one of the unique ones is the chained squig. This is basically how you get the ability, similar to a commissar, to keep your orcs from running away when they do break, and it's fairly important. Skill point wise, there's a few different ones. The WH is one that's pretty cool. Ships in range, including this ship, gain a free additional assault action every time they board an enemy ship. So this is another way to increase your already very effective strength of boarding actions. Favors. Let's talk about favors real quick. I have a favor on this ship, and you'll see it's a slightly different color. Depending on the favor you pick, it will designate the color scheme of that favor's clan, and so the Blood Axe clan is the favor that I've chosen. And you'll see that the favor basically gives me a couple of bonuses. So the first bonus it gives me is a Nova Cannon. This is not a typical orc weapon, but the Blood Axe clans are a clan that commandeers weapons from the Imperium very frequently, and so basically they've commandeered a Nova Cannon off of one of the Imperial ships, which gives me access to it. It's not as good as an Imperial one, and it does have a chance to misfire and destroy itself during any engagement. So it can be repaired for the next engagement, but you basically have a limited number of shots with this before it breaks itself. We also have commando training. Blood Axes again have basically taken to using Imperial tactics against them, and so they actually have the ability to use the running silent order to surprise enemy ships. This is not something that normal orcs are capable of. Only ships that have this favor can use that order. You'll notice that my ship also has some fighter squadrons, as I have the fighter squadron refueling station, which reduces the cooldown for fighter squadrons, and then I have some extra turrets, which basically give me more defenses against fighters and torpedoes and boarding pods and such. You'll also see here some of my ships have been destroyed in my last battle. So this ship was heavily damaged and is lost in the warp. That means it basically ran away and got lost. This ship got completely destroyed, so it's going to take 2 turns before I can use it again. And so I can usually pay points to repair my ships, but ships that are lost in the warp are gone for a short period of time, and there's nothing you can do to get them back quickly. But if I wanted to spend a little bit of my renown, I could go ahead and pay, and now this ship is back in service and can be used for the next fight. This ship, however, is going to be lost in the warp for at least 1 turn, so there's no sense in spending repairs on it. So we're going to just have to deal with not having that ship. Crew members, the crew members look way different, but they're pretty much the exact same as what the Imperials have. You'll notice that the Commissar is locked out currently, and that is because you have to take the squig, the chain squig, in order to unlock this slot. Normally orcs don't have access to the morale benefits of a Commissar, but you can get them if you feel you really need to, and it is probably one of the better skills to pick up. You can see I have neglected to do that for any of my ships. So we have issues with ships that are going to run away periodically. Coming back to favors, some of the other favors that are available, we have the Evil Sons clan, and the Evil Sons clan get a tractor cannon. This basically is a tractor beam. It allows us to grab another ship and kind of pull it towards us or keep it from getting away. And then we also have the bigger red button, which basically gives us an improved refill rate, so we can use this speed boost more often, more frequently. The Goth clans have a ramming gob. This is a massive increase in the damage of ramming for a particular ship. And then Raging Goths, basically you're really good at assault actions already, and now you're even better. And the Bad Moon clan's abilities are a shock cannon. A shock attack mega cannon is, I'm not familiar with this weapon. A targeted enemy ship sustains 2 assault actions at really long distance. Can target a ship with this shield active. Can only deal temporary critical damages. So basically this is like a long range lightning assault. And then secondly, we get an extra upgrade slot. So we get to pick, I think, another one of these green abilities for that ship that takes the Bad Moon clan. So pretty cool. Every faction, again, will have 4 unique ones, and every single ship can only ever be assigned one of these. You don't have to assign these, but they're generally pretty powerful buffs if you can save up the points to do it. And so it's worth generally having all of your ships decked out with favors in the skirmish mode. In other game modes, you're going to not be able to do that, as you're going to have a limited number of these that you can apply, such as in the campaign or in the multiplayer. In one of the multiplayer variants, you have a set amount of points, and so you'll have to basically purchase an entire fleet with those points, and you will not be able to equip all of your ships with these. It's just too expensive. So you'll have to choose which ones need favors versus which ones can get away without. So basically, yeah, that's it. We got a lot of cool stuff already built up since I played this captain quite a bit. But we're going to go ahead and go to a battle. So once we've gotten everything set and we've spent as many points as we want to, we can go ahead and go to battle. And going to battle will basically give us a random engagement with another faction. And we will have to choose our fleet at that point in time, and then go ahead and see the battle through. Okay, so we have a cruiser clash. If you want more details on the type of engagement you're dealing with, you can mouse over these question marks. But basically, cruiser clash is just seek and destroy. You know, two people on the map, and only one sticks around. We are the defender in this engagement, which means that the opponent has to engage us. If we just sit in a corner of the map and they don't come after us, they will actually lose the battle. At some point, there is a timer. And it looks like we are facing Space Marines. We don't know anything else about the fleet other than they are Space Marines. So you might remember Space Marines have pretty strong boarding actions. They're not very good at long range. And so that kind of bodes well for us, although we are facing an enemy that kind of matches our strengths. They're also more maneuverable than us, but we can get around that by using a couple of our ships that include fighters and bombers. So bombers are going to be particularly effective against Marines, and that is mainly because Marines do not have fighter squadrons to help defend against bomber attacks. So taking our 2 bombers are going to be pretty effective. I think I also want to take my battle cruiser, and we'll take some torpedoes. We'll take Daka. Actually, let's go ahead and take this one instead. More Daka, yeah. And then we have 43 points left, which is only enough to take one of these ships. There's a ram ship that does no guns, that just smashes into other ships. We got a Ravager with some torpedoes, or a gunship, or an onslaught. Torpedoes are very hard to land on marine ships due to their very, very high maneuverability. So I think we're just going to take a gunship. And this is a pretty big fleet, but I think that will do. So let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so each faction will have a deployment zone, which you can see on the map. Our deployment zone is on this edge of the map, and theirs is on that edge. Certain missions may move those deployment zones around, and so they won't always be on opposite ends of the match. We also have some terrain, so there's an asteroid field and a couple of gas clouds that could be useful. We don't particularly care for using gas clouds, but one thing that might be super sneaky to do would be to hide our Nova Cannon ship in this gas cloud and force the Marines to come to us. Since they're not very good at long range, they're not going to be able to sit back, and as they approach, we can start nailing them with our Nova Cannon. So I can put that ship there. Let's see. Let's put this ship back here as well. Now I'm going to have to move him over just a little bit so that we can fit both of these ships in. And then let's put our big ships kind of in a line right here. And we'll keep the gunship in the back for now. Got a bunch of this stuff already auto turned on, so I actually don't really want this guy to move at the moment. Okay, I think we're ready to go ahead and begin. And we're gonna go all stop for now.
Retro's on!
Haha. Forgot to stop.
Retro's on!
So you can see how slow our ships turn around. Alright, let's just go.
Hawks, hawks, hawks! You want us over there?
Let's just head out.
Okay, we'll go that speed.
One thing that you should do whenever you have ships with fighters, bombers, and assault boats is always deploy your fighters at the beginning of the match. That will put your ability on cooldown.
You got it.
But we can get that back up pretty quickly. Actually going to use that. We're going to go ahead and launch our torpedoes.
What you want? We's ready.
And then I'm going to reload.
Reloaded!
Which is going to
We's ready.
reduce the time on a lot of our abilities. We want our bombers deploying as frequently as possible.
Hawks is best.
Alright, torpedoes are back up.
Ready.
Alright, so they've deployed a bomb on us, so I'm going to hit our big red button and hopefully we'll be able to get out of it
in charge.
before it goes off. It's going to be close. And we were indeed able
Enemy
to get
ship
out.
sighted. Oops, oops, oops.
Alright, what do we see so far? Enemy ship. This is a light cruiser. We want to target its shield generation at this point.
What you want? Here we go. back in charge!
Alright, we destroyed that ship
We
very
stomped
quickly.
all over the enemy ship!
This is a bigger ship. He's going to be a big priority. And we'll set him
I'm
to
back
priority
in
2.
charge! Go guide us! I'm back in charge! Full decker!
Alright, 1 down.
Oaks is best! You got it! Oaks, Oaks, Oaks!
Torpedoes. Looks like we got 1 hit.
Yeah?
My Nova cannon can fire on
want us over
that
there?
guy. I can turn my ship here.
He's ready! Reloaded!
Alright.
You got it! Get up! What you want?
His shields are back up, but we're able to take him down pretty quickly.
That's not supposed to burn! Fix it! What you want?
That fire's kind of annoying.
Here we go! Taking damage, boss!
Let's see if we can't run this
Orcs,
guy.
orcs, orcs! Boarding is what orcs do best! More decker!
Alright, we're doing just fine. It sure seems like they didn't have as many points as we did, but we took out that one ship so quickly. Pretty surprising that they haven't
Orcs is best.
tried to retreat at this point.
You want us over there?
Let's see if we can't ram this guy.
Orcs, orcs, orcs! Enemy ship sighted!
Ah, there's the rest of their fleet.
Orcs is best.
So one of our ships is retreating.
You want us over there? Boss, we gotta go!
No, everybody's retreating. Let's,
What you want?
let's get that from happening.
Yeah? Here we go! Orcs, orcs, orcs! Wah! You got it.
This ship's probably going to get destroyed, but
You want us over there? More decker! He's ready!
that turned rather quickly on us.
Here we go! Orcs, orcs, orcs! What you want? Here we go! Hit the red button! You got it!
Let's see if we can get a torpedo hit on this guy. See how quick they can turn their
You want
ships.
us over there? Here we go!
That was a good torpedo hit right there.
You got it. Orcs, orcs, orcs! Full speed! You want us over there? Orcs, orcs, orcs!
Alright, we've got a lightning strike.
Boss, we smashed stuff on the enemy ship!
Good. Successful lightning strike. We also have repairs.
We's ready. Go, guide us!
Get out of there.
Here we go!
Smash him.
Hawks, hawks, hawks!
He's gonna blow himself up in the mine.
You want us over there? We's ready! Locked on, boss! Hawks, hawks, hawks!
Alright, we're gonna get another boarding action here.
Here we go!
Alright. Victory.
Yeah.
Barely. So he split up his navy. That's one of the reasons why we were so successful. One of his better ships wasn't in the initial engagement. It's almost never a good idea to split up your ships in a cruiser clash unless you're doing some kind of unique flanking attack. It's just better to have more firepower concentrated in a single area. You saw how much damage we were able to do to their light cruiser right as we approached. So my ships are pretty good, pretty well decked out. Most of our ships made it out okay. One of our ships that retreated got lost in the warp for a couple turns. Looks like just one. And obviously the Basha, the one that just barely survived at the end there, took heavy damage, so it's going to be out of commission for a couple of turns if we don't repair it. But this is essentially how the game is. I actually enjoy it a lot more on a smaller scale. So starting a new skirmisher, you're only going to have a couple of small ships, and you'll slowly accumulate a larger and larger fleet and be able to deploy more of it in any engagement. I find the more intimate small scale battles, like the 300 point engagements, are a lot more fun for me personally, just because I'm really bad at micromanaging a lot of different ships. But so if you're looking for expert level play, this is probably not the place to come. But if you just want to see some unique fighting, yeah, we're going to go through the rest of the factions, but not in this video. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up today. So this was just a little teaser taste of the orcs. The factions are going to largely resemble what you see in the game currently in the second one. However, I believe all of the factions are getting a complete makeover. There's some significant changes to the way boarding actions work in the game. So that's going to be slightly different. Repair is going to be slightly different. And every faction is going to get some new ships. I believe there's new classes of ships available for even the orcs, the Imperials, all of the older ones are going to get some new stuff. So it won't be just the same old thing in the Gothic Armada 2. It looks like we did get a new crew member for this particular one. This ship is a WH ship. They are mainly for boarding. So I'm going to go ahead and add some more boys to this ship, which means that when we get counter-boarded, we'll have slightly better defense against their boarding actions. And so that'll be a good one to max out for a ship that's specialized in getting in close and boarding enemy ships. But that's going to wrap it up for today's video. I will go ahead and do a similar short intro to each of the other factions, and we'll take a look at each of those at a later date. Until then, this has been the Nose Plays, and you guys have a good day.